We'd never stand with you." My father's voice was flat. "You're the absolute disgrace of this family." Then he hung up. For several seconds, I didn't move. I stood in the middle of my hotel room, staring at the phone in my hand, while the silence around me grew heavier. In less than an hour, hundreds of people would be watching me walk onto a stage in Washington, D.C., and my parents had just told me they wouldn't be there. I looked at the 2 VIP passes waiting on the desk. Their names were printed across them. My mother, my father. I wondered how long those seats would remain empty. "My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm 29 years old, a U.S. Army captain, and that morning, I was scheduled to receive the Silver Star, one of the military's highest decorations for valor. On my bed lay my dress uniform, perfectly pressed. Every ribbon represented a place I'd been, a person I'd lost, or a night I'd survived. One of those ribbons came from 18 months earlier. Our convoy had been ambushed during a night operation. 3 soldiers were trapped behind a burning vehicle. I remember the smoke, the screaming, and one of my soldiers grabbing my sleeve as I tried to reach him. "Captain, don't leave me." I went back. All 3 men came home, but I didn't know then that my family had their own version of what happened that night. Because my father had always chosen Julian. My older brother could fail at anything and still be called brilliant. 2 weeks earlier, Julian's latest business had collapsed. This time it was a luxury. Real estate company he'd built with money my parents had borrowed against their home. They had already drained their savings covering Julian's previous failures. They had sold investments, refinanced the house, and still, his creditors were demanding more. Then they came to me, not to congratulate me, not to ask about the ceremony. They wanted my military savings. "All of it?" I asked. My father didn't hesitate. "You're single, Evelyn. You don't have children. Julian has a future to protect." I stared at him. "And what about my future?" He sighed. "Your brother needs you." Julian leaned back in his chair and smiled. "You got lucky, Evelyn. The Army pays you to play hero. Some of us are actually building a life in the real world." That was the moment something inside me went quiet. I said no. 3 days later, my father called and told me my parents wouldn't attend the ceremony. Now the 2 VIP passes sat untouched. I could have walked onto that stage and pretended their absence didn't hurt. Instead, I picked up my phone and called the one person my parents had spent years pretending didn't exist. My Aunt Eleanor. She answered after 2 rings. "Evelyn? Aunt Eleanor?" My voice almost broke. "I need someone to sit with me today." There was no hesitation. "I'll be there." 20 minutes later, just as I was about to leave for the ceremony, my phone rang again. It was Eleanor. Her voice sounded different this time. "Evelyn, there's something you need to know." I sat down. "What?" A long silence followed. Then she asked quietly, "Your father never told you why he stopped speaking to me, did he?" "No." "Then you need to hear the truth before you walk into that ceremony." My stomach tightened. "What truth?" Eleanor lowered her voice. "The night Julian was accused of stealing from your grandfather..." She stopped. I could hear her breathing on the other end. "Your father wasn't protecting Julian from me, Evelyn. Your father was protecting Julian from the truth." I stared at the 2 empty VIP passes. For the first time that morning, I stopped wondering why my parents weren't coming and started wondering what they'd been hiding. "Your father was protecting Julian from the truth." I couldn't speak. For several seconds, all I heard was the faint hum of the hotel air conditioner. "What truth?" Eleanor took a slow breath. "Your grandfather didn't accuse Julian because of money." I frowned. "Then why?" "Because he found something connected to your combat mission." My stomach tightened. "What?" "Military documents." I sat down slowly. How would Grandpa even have access to my records? "He didn't have access to classified files," Eleanor said. "After the Army notified him about your Silver Star ceremony, he received copies of your award recommendation. He wanted to understand exactly what you'd done that night." That sounded like him. My grandfather had always been proud of my service. But something in those documents bothered him. "What?" "The version he received wasn't the same as the original." I stared at the phone. "Someone altered my report?" "Yes." The room suddenly felt colder. "What did they change?" Eleanor hesitated. "The section describing what happened after your convoy came under attack." The memory returned instantly. Smoke. Gunfire. 3 soldiers trapped behind a burning vehicle. And the order over my radio: "Get the convoy out of the kill zone." I hadn't been ordered to abandon those men. I had been ordered to get the convoy to safety, so I went back. 3 soldiers came home because I did. But the altered version left out something important, Eleanor said. What? Your decision to go back. My chest tightened. Then how did I still receive the silver star? Another officer noticed the discrepancy before the final review. The original evidence was recovered, the report was corrected, and your recommendation went forward. I looked down at my dress uniform. Who altered it? That was what your grandfather wanted to know. And Julian? Your grandfather found copies of the original award, documents in Julian's possession. My jaw tightened. Why would Julian have them? He claimed he'd found them accidentally. I almost laughed. Of course he did. But Eleanor's voice remained serious. Your grandfather didn't believe him. What happened? He confronted Julian. And Dad? Your father defended him. Julian's voice suddenly echoed in my memory. You got lucky, Evelyn. The army pays you to play hero. I had thought it was another cruel insult. Now it sounded rehearsed. Was Julian telling people my silver star wasn't deserved? Yes. He told people your grandfather had used his connections in Washington to get your recommendation pushed through. That was a lie. I know. Then why was he saying it? Eleanor paused. Because he needed people to doubt your story. I looked down at my phone. If he already had copies of the award documents, what else was he looking for? We never found out, she said. But your grandfather believed it was connected to what happened after you went back for those soldiers. My pulse quickened. There were other records, reports, communications logs, witness statements. The award recommendation was only one piece of the record. And Julian didn't have those? Not as far as your grandfather knew. Before I could ask another question, a knock sounded at my hotel door. Eleanor's voice became urgent. Evelyn, don't confront your father yet. Why? Because your grandfather believed your father knew more than he admitted. Another knock. I walked toward the door. A man in a dark suit stood outside. Captain Harper? Yes? I was given one instruction. Deliver this to you this morning. He handed me a sealed envelope. On the front was my grandfather's handwriting. Evelyn Harper. My hands began to shake. Why today? The man shook his head. I wasn't told. Then he turned and walked away. I closed the door. My grandfather had been dead for 4 years. I looked at Eleanor through the phone. Her voice broke. I knew he left something. I just didn't know what. I broke the seal. Inside was a single handwritten note. 6 words. Evelyn, don't trust your father. Beneath them was a date. I read it once. Then again, my blood ran cold. It was the date of my combat mission. I looked at the clock. 23 minutes until I walked onto that stage. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about what Julian had stolen. I was thinking about what my grandfather had discovered 4 years ago and why he'd waited until today to make sure I found out. For 4 years, I had accepted the Army's version of that night. 3 soldiers trapped, 1 decision to go back. 3 men brought home. A silver star recommendation built around that decision. But my grandfather's note had made me question the one thing I thought I knew. I called Eleanor back. What exactly did Grandpa find? There was a pause. I'm not sure, she said. But I remember him becoming obsessed with one part of your mission report. Which part? The communications after your convoy came under attack. I looked at the envelope on the table. What was wrong with them? He never told me everything. He said the official report didn't match what he'd been able to verify. My stomach tightened. Then I need to see the records myself. 20 minutes later, I was back at my laptop in the hotel room, still wearing the first half of my dress uniform. I opened my military personnel portal and pulled up my award documentation. The recommendation was there. The citation was there. The after-action summary was there. But something was missing. A reference number appeared beneath the Communications section. After-action communications. Restricted access. I clicked it. A message appeared. Content unavailable through personnel portal. I stared at the screen. Restricted material wasn't unusual, but this file was specifically referenced in my award packet. And according to my grandfather's note, he'd seen something connected to it. I picked up my phone and called the awards liaison listed on my paperwork. A man answered after 2 rings. Captain Harper? Yes. I need clarification about a communications file referenced in my silver star award packet. There was a brief pause. What file? I gave him the reference number. His tone changed immediately. That file isn't available through your personnel portal. I noticed. It contains operational communications. Access is limited. Then why is it referenced in my award packet? Because portions of it were used during the original review. My grip tightened around the phone. Was it changed? Silence. That silence told me more than his words could have. "Captain," he finally said, "I can't discuss the contents over the phone." I didn't ask about the contents. I asked whether the file was accessed after the original review. Another pause. Yes. By whom? I can't give you that information over the phone. Was the request made by someone in my chain of command? No. Someone currently assigned to my unit? No. Then give me something. He hesitated. There was an authorization reference attached to the request. What reference? JH47. GH? I can't tell you what the initials mean. I didn't need him to. Julian Harper? It was only a suspicion. But after everything I'd learned that morning, it was one I couldn't ignore. Who flagged the request? The liaison's voice became quieter. Major Daniel Mason. The name hit me differently. I knew it. I just hadn't thought about him in years. Mason had been the medical officer attached to our unit that night. I hadn't spoken to him since the mission. Why did he flag it? I don't know. You must have a note. There was one attached to the file. What did it say? I can't access it. Who can? I believe Mason could. I sat back. So he knew something was wrong. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The liaison was silent. Where is he now? I asked. Retired. Do you have a current contact? Not through this office. Then what can you give me? He hesitated. Mason's last assignment location. He gave me the address. I wrote it down. Before I could ask anything else, he said, Captain Harper, yes? If you're asking these questions because of that request, I'd recommend you stop investigating this over the phone. Why? Because whoever submitted that request wasn't supposed to know. The file existed. My stomach tightened. Wasn't supposed to know? No. The line went quiet. Then he added, if you need the rest of the record, you'll have to come in person. I can't. I'm due at the ceremony. I understand. The call ended. I stared at the address I'd written down. Mason, the officer who had been there that night. The officer who had flagged something in my file. And possibly the man who had refused to let the revised report stand. I searched for him. His name appeared in an old Army publication. There was a photograph beside the article. Major Daniel Mason standing at a unit remembrance ceremony. Behind him was a memorial wall. 3 names were engraved across the stone. I zoomed in. My breath caught. They were the same 3 soldiers I'd gone back for. Not a memorial to their deaths. A remembrance ceremony held years after the mission, and Mason was standing there as the guest speaker. I stared at the photograph. Why would the officer who had flagged the altered report be the one speaking at a remembrance ceremony for those 3 men? Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe Mason had simply stayed close to the unit. But something about the photograph bothered me. I sent it to Eleanor. Do you know this man? Her reply came almost immediately. Mason? Yes. Grandpa mentioned him. My fingers moved quickly. What did Grandpa say? The typing indicator appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, she replied, he said Mason was the only officer who refused to sign the revised report. I read the sentence twice. The revised report. The one that had almost destroyed my Silver Star recommendation. The one that removed my decision to go back. The one Julian may have somehow accessed. Mason had refused to sign it. And my grandfather had known. I was about to ask Eleanor what happened to him when my phone vibrated. Unknown number. 1 message. Don't go looking for Mason. I stared at it. Another message appeared. He already paid the price for telling the truth once. My first instinct was fear. My second was anger. Because whoever had sent those messages had just made one thing very clear. I was finally looking in the right place. When my name was called, the room rose. Hundreds of people applauded as I walked toward the stage. I looked toward the front row. 2 seats remained empty. My parents' names were still printed on them. For 1 second, the ache returned. Then I looked at the Silver Star waiting in the presenter's hands. I walked forward anyway. 23 minutes later, the ceremony was over. I left the auditorium, carrying the medal my family had refused to witness, and drove. Straight to the address Mason had given me. He opened the door before I knocked twice. You came. I got your message. His expression changed. You were threatened. I showed him my phone. Mason read the message silently. Then he stepped aside. Come in. A folder was waiting on his dining table. The transmission, he said. I opened it. There it was. 2214. Convoy route compromised. Do not proceed. My hands went cold. That warning was never in my report. No. Who received it? Your command did. Then why didn't we stop? Because someone removed the transmission from the official communications log before the final report was submitted. I looked up. You said my father wasn't the person who altered the report. He wasn't. Then how do you know he protected whoever did? Mason opened another folder. I reported the missing transmission 4 years ago. He pushed a copy toward me. At the bottom was a signature. Richard Harper, my father's signature. I stared at it. Why was my father contacting the command office? He was the first civilian to contact them after I reported the discrepancy. Why? I asked the same question. Mason's jaw tightened. I was told to stop asking. He pulled out another document, a records office visitor log. One entry was highlighted. Julian Harper, accompanied by Richard Harper's attorney. The date was 4 years ago. The location was the same, military records facility where the original communications archive had been stored. My breathing slowed. Julian wasn't just looking for my award records. No, Mason said. He was looking for the original communications. Why? Mason turned another page. A handwritten note from my grandfather was attached. Julian discovered that the compromised route was connected to one of his father's business contacts. I stared at the sentence. Suddenly, Julian's obsession made sense. He hadn't been trying to prove I got lucky. He had found something that could expose someone connected to our family, something dangerous enough that my father had intervened. But who compromised the convoy? I whispered. Mason shook his head. We never proved it. And my father? He didn't create the evidence. Mason looked directly at me, but he made sure the investigation stopped before we found the person responsible. For years, I'd believed my family hated my military career because they were ashamed of me. Now I understood it was more complicated. They hadn't simply wanted me to fail. They had needed me to stop asking questions. I looked down at the silver star on my uniform. My grandfather hadn't left me a weapon. He'd left me a trail. And now I had the first piece of proof. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth. Because once the truth was documented, there would be nowhere left for my family to hide.